I am here with Conan Neutron and Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Good afternoon, Conan.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Craig. It's been a little bit.
It has, and we are coming up on the end of the year, and it's been quite a year for you.
Yeah, I think it's been quite a year for a lot of us.
Well, yes,
but yes, I agree. It's been as much as it's been a horror-scape in most things life, and certainly for the ability to tour and whatnot, or just function as a normal human being. Two records.
Right.
2 records this year.
Yes, absolutely. And and amongst all of that, and I guess on 2 very unfortunate passing away, in that as well. And that kind of, I think, ties into your new record for Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. I think you've been on the show a number of times. Why don't you just give us a quick rundown on the Secret Friends for those who may not have heard?
Yeah, so Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends is the name of the band. This is, it's predominantly a vehicle for my songwriting. Tony Ash always plays bass, who is a Louisville transplant who lives in Kenosha now. And Dale Cover from the Melvins plays drums. The recordings are always that lineup, and Toshi Kasai producing. And then for the live shows, we have different folks play with us. Anywhere from as a power trio up to and including, I think the biggest one was like seven-piece band, something along those lines. This is the 3rd record, because Protons and Electrons is technically a compilation.
Right.
So this is conceived as a record. This is the 3rd record or the 4th record, depending on how you pedantically decide to sort that. This record is a concept record about mental health and depression. Imposter complex, suicidal ideation, bipolar syndrome, things along those lines. It's very, very personal to me. And the whole point was to make a record about those topics without it necessarily sounding depressing, but then also to get it right, because it's like, you don't get a mulligan when you write about stuff like that.
Right. So, but the new record is titled Dark Passengers.
Right. That would have been nice to include, huh? Yeah. Dark Passengers is the name of it, correct?
Yeah, and I guess as you mentioned, it's a song about mental health, and when did you start writing this? Because you've been working, you've been releasing music from the Protons and Electrons series for, I think it was almost a year.
Long. I think it was about. From the first release to the last release, I believe it was a year and a half. Like the idea originally was one every month for 12 months. But when you're dealing with putting out a vinyl record, not just putting something up on the internet, there's a lot that can and did go wrong in the supply chain for that. So while those were coming out, these songs were being written. Okay. We tracked them in January of 2019. Actually, the week after the Household Gods record. There was 2 records 2 records recorded in the space of 2 weeks that people wouldn't hear for 2 years.
Okay, yeah, because you kind of you sort of teased this record when we talked this summer on the Household Gods record.
Correct. And the idea originally was that we were going to do a bunch of touring, ostensibly for Protons and Electrons throughout the spring, come back, release Dark Passengers, and then do like another leg or 2 around that. Of course, that didn't happen. And so we kind of sat on it for a while, kind of seeing, okay, well, what's going on with the world? Like, if we're rebooking these tour dates, we need to make sure the record comes out like a little later. And when it became increasingly clear that, okay, things are not getting better anytime soon, let's just get it out in the world. And so Learning Curve Records, who we love, and Rainier is a total champion of kind of weirdo music and noisy stuff, and a lot of our friends bands around there put out the record, and we put out the most 2020 record ever that was recorded in January of 2019, because it's all about depression and mental health. Yeah, and it's been depressing times. It's been depressing times for everyone. course, we'll be coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Lauren's passing at the time of this recording in like 2 weeks. And of course, Vern passed away in August, which I don't believe we've discussed since then, because we did one of the only interviews, the joint interviews we did was with you, because we thank you for your support and your endless support, not just of us, but of awesome weird music in general. But yeah, in August, which I guess everyone probably would know at this point, is that Vern Rumsey, who was in Household Gods with me, and of course the Mighty Unwound, passed away. Yep.
So yeah, and I mean it just everything kind of coming together in a terrible storm that way around.
Yeah.
The central theme of this record.
Yeah, there's a record specific. There's a song specifically about that on the record called "Get Old or Die Trying," which, although it's a funny title, it's actually very serious. You know, I've been personally touched by a lot of folks, you know, committing suicide. You know, whether it's explicitly or just, what do you call it, a death on the installment plan? Is that what the Celine quote is? Yeah, it is Death on the Installment Plan. Excellent. Actually, it's a book. It's not a quote. But you know, there's a lot that I could speak to with that. But you know, we lost a lot of people this year, and you know, lose people all the time. But this year has taken a pretty tragic toll. And also within the liner notes of the record, we have information for like mental health resources and things along those lines, because it's a rough time. I mean, spoiler alert, maybe if someone's listening to this in the far future, like that this is going to be like a time capsule or whatever, but it's a rough time. People are having a hard time just in general. If there's people that have addictions or whatever, you know, that can lead to backsliding and poor behavior. But the idea is, you know, what that song is literally, you know, let's get old. Let's better to, you know, it's perfectly fine to fade away.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess was there a catalyst that started you down this road when you decided to start writing this music?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I suppose I kind of buried the lead there. So I'm a high functioning manic depressive. So, and that's something that there's like a certain stigma to talking about that kind of thing that kind of seems like it's sort of starting to go away. You know, people will assume that, you know, with me especially, that I'm such a busy guy. I always am doing so much stuff that they think like, oh, how could you possibly, you know, have depression? It's like, well, I've been manic depressive my entire life. The key is it's not the manic part you have to worry about.
Right.
Which is a line in one of the songs too. And, you know, I think all the stuff that this band, all the song topics that we've written about, there's a lot of them, and I stand by all of them. You know, concept records or not, like the Hannibal Lecter record, Art of Murder, and you know, Protons and Electrons. It's like even each song was like to a theme. But the idea here was to like, okay, well, let's talk about these things like imposter complex, you know, things like depression and that people actually deal with, but let's do it in a way that I love the Blackheart Procession, right? But it doesn't have to sound like the Blackheart Procession. Let's do it in a way that's like true to the sound of the band, but push it in a direction where almost the opposite on some stuff from Protons and Electrons, because Protons and Electrons are all singles, so they had to get in whatever they're going to do, whether poppy, heavy, you know, rockin', whatever. They had to get in and get out. You have the space of a 7-inch, so it's like, you know, no wasting time, just get right down to business, and that was like the necessity. So this was the other end, which is these songs will take as long as they need to develop, and in most cases, actually, you know, I think there's only 2 songs that are egregiously long, but they're there for a reason, and they're that way for a reason, and they develop that way for a reason. And it's, you know, when you're thinking about something like, you know, like the song Bipolar Complex, as a for instance, it's the whole point is as it develops, there's like new elements that are introduced and kind of come in and come out, and it's meant to sort of simulate what that feels like. And I've had a couple of people that actually do suffer from bipolar complex sort of bring that up to me, which is that's nice. And that's because that's exactly what I had in my mind, but you know, whatever. Well, there's what's in your mind and what actually happens. But you know, like Impossible Task is like one of the heaviest riffs I think I've ever written in any band. And certainly one of the heaviest of the group. But it's like, oh, but the whole thing about the impossible task is the concept of the impossible task, which is literally not being able to achieve, in some cases, very mundane, everyday needs and chores and tasks and things along those lines, because you know, you have this mental block against it that comes from depression. And it's something that I think is pretty important. And also, it's like the idea behind this record is like it's the first one ever on any album I've ever done that has a title track, meaning that like there's a song named the same thing as the record, and it's that way specifically for a reason, because this is something you live with,
right? And
pretending otherwise is, you know, relatively foolhardy,
right? And a constant, you know, a constant effort to deal with.
Right.
So one of the things I guess that stood out, and I think this is true for all of your music, but approaching this as a, you know, kind of from a concept record, listening to it and thinking about it as a concept record, is that like a lot of the lyrics, and again, like I think you do this in a lot of your tunes, where the lyrics will follow, like they blend in with the instrumentation, you know. So what you're doing on guitar kind of mimics a lot of, you know, the vocals. And when I think about that in a concept record, did that pose a challenge when you're trying to write lyrics and write music?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because the whole, because especially because the idea is for interweaving sounds and interweaving concepts like within the songs. The idea was to have them not be interchangeable, but kind of swap in and out, and you know, be moody in that way. And it was difficult. And there are things like I changed keys the week before we recorded them for a couple songs for no discernible I had my reasons, but let me tell you, it was a terrible idea, because it took me a lot longer because I had practiced the vocals in the other key, and then like I was like, oh right, I gotta transpose all this stuff now. But the point of fact is, if you listen to it as a recording, it works better, it fits better, it does the thing that it's supposed to do conceptually, which is some real kind of, you know, unless you're sitting around in a music theory class, you're probably not going to be thinking about it. But the idea is that the way it kind of interweaves together, it's all very, it's on purpose, and that's something that there's a lot of things in this record that are kind of thrown out there in the way that people are gonna. Not everyone's probably going to connect with everything, but they're like concepts within concepts. Like the idea of a spite house, right? A spite house. This is the last song of the record. There are actually things called spite houses, right? And then they're put like, you've got like a small 10 foot by set of property, like 10 foot by like 300 feet or whatever, and you build an edifice specifically to piss off your neighbor or to make something just like ridiculous and spend all this effort and time ostensibly to piss someone else off. But then the idea of it also is like, well, that's, you know, that can be a mental construct as well. Like, you know, what is any artistic endeavor then if not to build something up just to evoke a reaction, positive or negative? Then within also that part of the song, there's an extended part. It's actually a part that's meant to be, if we ever get the chance to freaking play it live, it's certainly not improvisational, but it's the point that it could be stretched out. It can be stretched out to the point that you have drums going, then there's a second drum set that comes in, and there's the bass line going, then everything kind of crashes back in and comes together. So in that song, there's sort of like a spite house of an arrangement that's designed to titillate and or annoy. And in the same way that, like, if you see a house that you know, I think there's like the Westboro Baptist Church, there's like a neighbor they had that like made a super fabulous rainbow house next to it that they have to see every day, right? So that's again concepts within concepts. It's it's a song about Spite House, but it's also about the idea of what that means mentally. But then also within the song Spite House, there is a Spite House 7 arrangement that especially you would notice like live, because that's something that by nature of what I'm thinking about in terms of the live band, if we have other people that like know the song or a guest or whatever, then they could come in and like, again, it's not jamming, but it's something where it's a specific part of the song intended to evoke a reaction that once you know the song, you're not going to have the same reaction. So by changing that piece of it and, you know, elongating in whatever obnoxious way we were to see fit, that would be the Spite House of Spite House.
You know, and it's interesting you bring that particular song up too, is because, you know, you mentioned in the beginning that, you know, the part of the concept is to talk about these dark and talk about these challenging topics, but not make the music specifically dark in that way. And I feel like Spite House in itself, like, you know, when you're describing what it's about, it also like Spite House jumps out to me as kind of being one of the catchiest tune. Having some of the catches,
right.
Album,
yeah,
you know, like,
you don't need to care about literally any of the stuff I just talked about to be like, oh, that's a good tune, you know. Which you know, as much as I'm sitting here, like, you know, with the conspiracy board, like drawing all things out. That's the point. Is you shouldn't need like, you know, the thesis, the graduate thesis on it to be able to understand and enjoy it. That's certainly not the goal. But yeah. I know what you're getting at. Yeah.
It kind of speaks to the dichotomy of the album, though. You know that, you know, like it's still a rock album, you know, and
and for the people that like just don't care about any of this stuff, look, it's still like there's big riffs, you know, the songs. I mean, there's a song that to me kind of sounds, you know, I think Misery Machine kind of sounds like Judas Priest. I don't know if anyone else hears it. Kind of wild that that's on our record. That's our Cure record, right? Okay, but that's me. Is anyone else hearing that? I don't know. You know, it doesn't matter. But if it's something where you don't care about those things, like you don't have to engage it on that level. And also, like, I mean, Without the Poison, What Am I? That's Lindsay Charles from the Cell Phones sings that.
Well, I was actually gonna ask you about that. It's a good segue into that. Is she also wrote all the lyrics on that song too, and handles all the vocals. And I know you've had other people sing on your songs and the albums, but this might be the first time where you've had
it is. I mean, I suppose to a certain degree, Fight Math was on the first record was a collaboration, but it's with Eugene and myself. But also, like, it's like with Eugene, it's like I don't even know what he's on about anyway. It's like, you know, like pick a couple phrases out. But I've certainly I looked at that as like a loose guide point to what that song should be like live. We talked about this concept, Lindsay, because I'm a huge fan of the band The Cell Phones. I think Lindsay Charles is incredible talent, incredible front person, incredible singer, and we talked about the idea that when you have these problems or challenges to overcome and these things, these dark passengers, that there's this idea, real or imagined, that by medicating yourself, you know, seeking a curative for that and stabilizing your regular life, what if that extinguished the thing that made you creative in the first place? You know, a lot of that's, you know, probably based on paranoia. You know, I suppose there is some precedent for it, but the important thing isn't whether it's based in fact. As a feeling, it's something that when you're a creative person, you think about,
right? Whether
it's front of brain or back of brain, because there are examples of that happening. And so we talked about that, and like that's when I mentioned the phrase, you know, well, without the poison, what am I? And she actually said, hey, do you want to, you know, collaborate on this? Or do you want like write stuff and I'll sing it? And I was like, no, I want you to write this from your perspective. Because this isn't just Conan Neutron is depressed the record. Right. This is meant to be something for everybody. And, you know, I personally think she's a wonderful lyricist as well. And, you know, it's a concept I think anyone that has any creative bone in their body can dig into. And it's sort of like, it's asking a question, right? And so you get to somewhat answer the question within the song. And I mean, she knocked it out of the park. It's fantastic. Like it isn't exactly what I would do. And I love that because that was the point is I wanted her to be the Mark Lanigan to our Queens of the Stone Age or something along those lines. Or I'm trying to think of like another example, but have her presence non-diminished and non-sublimated but also brought into the greater whole, because he's sung with us live a lot, but it's, you know, like a Fight Math or Quid Pro Quo or something that's again, all my lyrics and all my point of view. So to have her actually lay into it in the same way. Ashley from Glacial Speed did that song Conversion in that same way, that I wanted that to be Ashley's voice, and that's not on this record. That's like it ended up being for the Bandcamp Trans Day of Awareness, but I think that's the only other time that happened that I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah. So but that also was like, I wanted someone with that voice and lived experience speaking their truth. Like that was important for the song for me. That was more important than having like that creative control of like, no, it's gotta do it this way. Yeah, and it lends, I think it also, you know, looking at the bigger topic, you know, the bigger topic of mental health, it also kind of lends that different lens, or it gives a different lens to kind of that or a different perspective, you know, to what is a much larger topic. Well, the idea of having someone else in a wildly different position for that lived experience is important. I mean, like, you know, if I had unlimited budget, unlimited resources, like who knows, maybe that's what the whole record would be. But then also, like, I had certain things that I wanted to get across as well. So the fact that it's there and it's at a very sort of prominent early part of the album is not a mistake in any way, shape, or form. And I just think Lindsay Charles is the best. I mean, she's just astounding talent. She's also a mom. Anyone that has not picked up the new Cell Phones record yet, not only is it amazing, but the artwork is amazing, because it's like a painting of her with like future shades and baby, and it's really must be seen to believe. But like it's something where I have a lot of respect for the fact that she, you know, she's a new mom, and also is like, you know, a ripper of a musician and a vocalist, and manages to balance all of it. But at the same time asking questions that song posits. So anyway, right. Cell Phones are great. I guess I could have just said that. But. So I guess one of the other questions, I think, so the new record is Dark Passengers. It's out now it's at neutronfriends.bandcamp.com, as well as learningcurverecords.bandcamp.com, or just learningcurverecords.com. Yep. So the track listing then, you know, the order, what went into that? Oh man, good question. So, because you know, sequencing determines what a record is, and for me, if you can find out where you start and where you end, you're in a good spot. Now, for me, Spite House always had to be at the end, and that might surprise some people because that's, you know, kind of a catchy tune, like whatever. But the point is that's again a reference point within a reference point within a reference point for the whole thing, and then also at the very end of it, we kind of like let this note ring out. If you listen real closely, there's kind of like you hear us sort of spaz out and start laughing. And that specifically is because, like, for such a super serious topic, it's sort of like, well, but also remember, like, life is to be enjoyed as well. So that's, I knew that was at the ending. I debated about putting the title track first, but in a way, stylistically, it's enough of a departure that I thought it would be maybe misinterpreted that someone's like, oh, it's all going to be, you know, The Cure. I don't know if anyone thinks it's The Cure other than me, but so it was like, well, Impossible Task, which is a song we toured on and played, I think, almost every show since we wrote it. I was like, well, why don't we just start with the Impossible Task? Yeah, that way it's like, people that are expecting the rockers, they get a rocker, and right. It's a great one, and that kind of like draws them in. And then you get the title track, and then you get the second voice of Lindsay Charles, and then it kind of gets to explore from there. For me, I knew, because I think about it in terms of vinyl too, always, even if it's not how people listen. And so the end of the first side is like, oh, that's definitely Bipolar Complex. Okay. And because that's another one where it evolves and changes, new things come in, new things leave, guitars replace vocal melodies, et cetera, and it goes on and on for a while in a way that, like, if you do it live, the only thing I can this might be a bit of a deep cut, but if you think of the Buzzcocks, A Different Kind of Tension, they have a song called I Believe that's just if you listen to that and listen to Bipolar Complex, I'm like, oh, okay, that's the thing, because especially I saw them do it live once, and it blew my mind that like it just kind of like they elongated it out, they stretched it, really cool. But I was like, that's how you close side A. That's side A closing, because you start off with, okay, the impossible task, right? Then you have the diagnosis. Then you're starting off on side B, and it's, you know, it's another ripper, because it's never bad to start off with a ripper. But, you know, what is it? Okay, well, it's starting position. And that is one song that I thought that song was going to be different, turn out different than it was. I thought it was going to be a little more laid back's the wrong word, but like maybe a little less frantic. Like I kind of envisioned it being like maybe like 15 beats per minute slower. But that, I mean, it's fine. It's what it is, and it's where it needs to be. But the whole point there is, okay, so you have the diagnosis, right? What do you do next? Okay, well, that's the starting position. And like part of that's like, I forget the exact line, but it's along the lines of, you know, the Bruce Springsteen, want to change my clothes, my hair, my face sort of thing, which is, oh yeah, every once in a while I stare at the mirror on the wall. I look at who I am, and it's not enough at all. Again, so we're talking like more diagnosis here. Then there's more lived experience, you know, Misery Machine. Oh, that's actually, sorry, Anadonia Blues, which is, Anadonia is the inability to feel anything. So the title itself is a joke. Because if you have actual Anadonia, you can't have the blues. You can't feel anything. You're literally so depressed you cannot feel anything, good or bad. So that's that one on there, which actually built off of a Tony Ash bass line, I might add. Then the aforementioned Get Old or Die Trying, which I assume needs no introduction as far as that goes. And then Maybe I Was a Captain is basically me simultaneously being terrified and sort of taking stock of my place creatively, and being you know, the organizer, the go-getter, but then also doubting myself all the time, constantly, always, but then pressing forward anyway. And then just the idea of, again, what we talked about in Authentic Fraud on the first side of the record, which I guess I skipped, which is being aware of imposter complex, but not really having the luxury to let it define you. And, you know, part of that's just stuff that as the band has evolved and become something that some people care about, there have been times where we have something that ostensibly lives in your head most of the time when it isn't making records or touring. You know, you can do a lot of second guessing. And when you have people signing on for the vision because they like the music and they like the experience, you have responsibility to them to take care of them. You know, much as if, you know, you're a captain of a ship.
Right.
That's why one of the reasons why there's so many nautical analogies in music, I think. But yeah, that's literally what that is. And to be kind of coming to terms from that, and that's a lot going on in that one. That's one of the ones that I dicked around with until the last second, and I think it's a good song. I'm happy with it. I kind of made myself a little bit crazy, hilariously, on that one. And then, yeah, like I said, Spite House ends it out because of all the reasons I mentioned, but then also because there's that if you listen to the very end, there's a little bit of celebration, like it's actually going to be okay,
right,
at the end of it. That was vital to me. Like I didn't want to end on I didn't want to end on a bad note.
Right. Well, yeah,
gotta give that like you know, just as the day was dawning, sort of hope.
Yeah, and you know, and I think, you know, your description there, you know, so like the start of the record, Impossible Task, I would dare say that, you know, it kind of is also the song that's easiest to get into the subject matter with. It, you know,
right.
There are, you know, you can understand the lyrics without getting really drawn in. Whereas as you dive into the other songs, like you mentioned, it's still a rock record. You can enjoy the record without getting, you know, meta about it. But then there are, you know, you can dive into the lyrics and start to really kind of try and dissect what all of this means, because
it's there for you if you want to dig in, right? Yep. But it isn't like, you know, all right, flump, here's your required reading to listen to this record.
Right, but it's not as literal in a sense where it's like beating you over the head with it. So, you know,
yeah, I mean, like it was important for me to address it directly, but not be so blatantly obvious about it too. Because again, like it's, I think one of the problems people have with concept records, even if they don't realize it or able to articulate it, is that there's a lot of burden put on the listener to give a damn about a lot of things. And the important thing for this was to have it work on all the different levels that people would want to engage into it, and to have things be there for them if they want it, but not have it be a requirement. Again, no required reading ahead of time. Like, I mean, I know people that are like, frankly, have said they love the record, but are not, they make a special point of saying, oh, they're not lyrics people, which I'm like, I don't know what that means, but okay. And I think that means that they just don't listen that closely to the lyrics. Okay, yeah, whatever, fine. Like I'm not that kind of guy. I am a lyrics guy, I guess, if that's the A and B, the binary choice, then I guess I am a lyrics guy. But you don't have to pay that close attention to it. But if you do, then there's things reference back. There's turns of phrases that are, everything's there for a reason to set a mood and to build tension and release in multiple ways. And I basically made myself nuts trying to pull this off. So I'm glad it seems to have landed. So
no, absolutely. I mean, it's a very good record, and it's very much a Conan, and I guess I would say, the trouble I have with some of the concept records is that it seems like they're trying to force something into a song that maybe wasn't supposed to be. And I don't think that's that's definitely not the case here. These are all, your songs, and I think you achieved your goal, and, really well.
Like you don't want to go do Operation Mindcrime, right? You don't want to, where it's just like, or I mean, I guess, is Mr. Roboto a successful concept record? I guess. I don't know. Like I'm just trying to think of like examples of kind of missing the mark. But yeah, that's the idea. That's it. You hit the nail on the head. Is like I'm a fan of that. I'll be honest with you. If the music's good, I'm even a fan of bad concept records. It's just sort of like, really, like Jailbreak is supposed to be, like, by Thin Lizzy is supposed to be a concept record. And it's like, but is it? Is it really? Like, if you look at the like the cover art, it's like they're breaking out of some jail in the future where, like, boogieing is prohibited or something, like, who knows. And you're like, okay, that works for like the title track and it makes for a cool album cover, but can you really say that this is a concept record? Like, okay, but anyway.
Right.
So I was thinking about that in terms of, again, multi-layered, and I'm glad to hear it landed. I mean, it also the idea of trying to release something that's layered in this environment with, man, you're lucky if you can catch people for like 30 seconds of one song.
Right. Oh yeah.
It's sort of like, wow, I'm sinking a lot of emotional investment. Like, every time anyone puts out a record, it's an emotional investment. But it's like, wow, I'm not only sinking a lot of emotional investment into it as a record, but I'm putting into it because of the subject matter is so important to me and it's so personal to me. And then also because I specifically tried to make it not sound depressing, and also because I wanted it to still be able to work. Like, I managed to put more pressure on myself and the band, but mostly myself, to pull this off because of the awareness of the environment and how people choose to listen and consume new music. So I consider any positive affirmation of any part of it to be a massive victory because of that, because it's basically, like a lot of things in this band, very almost over thought out.
Well, and I guess maybe somewhat ironically, like, you're doing this on a record where that's pushing your own mental health, where you're talking about mental health.
Right, exactly. Well, and so that's just it. There are like large segments of times where it's like I couldn't work on it. Like, I just or actually worse, I tried and it just was like, oh, I'll just push through. Terrible. It was bad. I was like, nope, that's good. And like, that's all the stuff that, like, didn't make it and got weeded out, this and that. But I mean, yeah, it's like life doesn't stop. And people talk about, like, oh, well, everyone can be so creative because they're in lockdown because of COVID. It's like, do you understand how creativity works? Because if you're like feeling anxiety, if you're feeling like stress and depression, the last thing you usually can do is create. Like, if you're lucky, you can put in the work. but you're not necessarily going to make anything worthwhile.
Yeah, and even talking to artists over the last 7-8 months now, you know, that's exactly what I hear is, you know, like we got into this and that was like the creativity to shut off because of all the isolation and everything else that was weighing on people. And it took a lot of, you know, I know talking to artists, it took a while for a number of artists to get kind of back into the groove.
So at the very beginning of lockdown, well, strange enough, we were actually on tour, and then we had to basically cancel all the rest of our dates. We got through 2 of them and had to come back. But I also got laid off from my day job, so that was sort of like, okay, staring down the barrel of a gun financially, and you know, there's the creative future looks uncertain. So that was all going on, and like, I was like, well, okay, I'll sit down and write some songs. Nope. For the first time since starting Conan Neutron, The Secret Friend, so the first time in almost 6 years, I think, along those lines, I couldn't write, which was terrifying to me because that was one thing. It was like if I sat down to write, I could always write, and 89% of the time, good stuff. Like something good would come out of it. And this was just, it was gone. It was gone. And that was terrifying to me because I was like, well, what if that just doesn't come back? What if that doesn't come back? It's like, well, at least I got this other record done.
Right.
You know, and I guess that's the last record. And it took about seven weeks, maybe along those lines. And it was sort of like after I kind of started to get past some of the directionless dread and anger that I had, and or at least started to work through it. Then it kind of gradually started to come back. And then I was like, okay, now I can still do this. Because it's like, well, it's like forgetting how to be a carpenter or something, where you still know how to do it, but it's also different from being a carpenter because there's elements of creativity to it. So you're accessing different parts of your brain. And I do feel like that, you know, inspiration and perspiration are both important, but I've amazed anyone that can is writing stuff right now, because it's like, again, my main thing is like, wow, I'm testing the theory of this being something that can just go up on the shelf and live for forever and come back down when it needs to. And this is like the most it's like, oh yeah, you think so? But it is. And we've actually, you know, I don't know when we're going to record them, probably in the spring, maybe, depending on how things are going. But I mean, there's something like 14 new songs even after this now.
Okay.
And they're different. You know, and that's good. But again, I was terrified. I was like, is this gone? Which, you know, it wasn't even without the poison. What am I? It's like, nope, poison's gone. Everything's gone. Right. The elixir's gone. It's medicine cabinet's empty.
Well, and I guess that kind of brings up a question, you know, which is, you know, like, so you tour a lot, you know, you're on the road, you know, you're a working musician. So you're on the road a lot promoting your music in the band. And, you know, usually you would put out an album and tour.
Yeah.
And this has kind of created a situation where you can't tour, and you know, it's more difficult to promote the album. And in the meanwhile, and I've talked to other artists who are doing the same thing, where it's, you know, you're still creating. So you potentially, you know, if you get a chance to tour again, or when you get a chance to tour again, you'll have like maybe 2 albums worth of.
Well, sure. Yeah. You've never gotten the chance to play in front of humans. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and that's real. You know, that's very real. I know there are friends, bands that we have that like just put out a record, like maybe like late last year or early this year, that have like a whole new record worth of stuff going. What does that look like? I don't know. Right. I will say that, like, you know, there's songs I've been like dying to play live on this record. I think the Impossible Task we've been playing for a long time. Tony was just like, that riff's like one of my favorite riffs ever. We have to play that. I'm like, okay, cool. And people are like, oh, which one is that on? I'm like, you don't have it yet. Which is not that weird for like most bands, but the way this band operates, it's usually like all the recordings done, the records come out, and then we play it live, and that's generally how it works. So that's like the only song I think that's ever been the way. But yeah, I mean, I have like I mentioned the whole thing with Spite House, about how it having like the arrangement of you know, this elongated Spite House of a section within the song Spite House, like something along those lines, about the Buzzcock style ending with Bipolar Complex. I have all these like grandiose ideas, but also be like, hey, it'd be cool to see like how this slots in with everything else. You know,
Right.
that'd be awesome. Not to mention the fact that, like, hey man, we got freaking, you know, we got autobiographies to sell over here. Like it's like trying to, I mean, I will say thank goodness for Bandcamp Day. That's I mean, it's been like a creative lifesaver, because it's something where I'm in a position where I'm not supported explicitly by the music, but it's something that pays for itself and then some, usually.
Yeah, right.
We'll go ahead and say that has not been the case with No Touring.
Right.
And
yeah.
it's demoralizing, because we had a lot of really incredible stuff planned for this year, but I mean, so did a lot of other people, right? But you know, like, what are you gonna do? Roll with the punches. So play them eventually. You know, like maybe we could do like one of those. I don't think we have a high enough profile, but maybe we could do like one of those things, like, you know, Sonic Youth playing Daydream Nation beginning to end. Conan Neutron, Secret Friends, Blaze Dark Passengers beginning to end. I mean, that's, jeez. Like I couldn't even imagine being in a band that had that level of interest in it that would be sustainable. But you know, maybe for like a record release or something, or like a small. Right. Yeah, hit Chicago and Minneapolis, friendly territory or something along those lines. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, good songs are good songs. And I feel really good about these. I think there's only one song that I would be really bummed out to have to try to play live. And other than that, the rest of them would be like, great, let's do it. So when there are live shows again, we expect to do that. I guess this would be a moment where I would mention, I'm not big into the live streaming a set situation. This is some of an atypical stance. I'm not a hardliner against it. It's just this is a not for me situation. Mm-hmm. And specifically, that's because the recorded presentation versus the live presentation, the whole point is to have people be as much in the moment as possible, like every part of the presentation. So inclusive of, you know, me dressing up like you know, like a noise rock Prince or James Brown or Glenn Campbell or something, like bringing in like an element of the show where there's a direct interaction. And I have seen people pull off the live stream show thing, and it's been really cool, and I've enjoyed watching it, but it's not how I want to present the music.
Right.
And that's fine. There's plenty of bands that are, and good for them. That's good. You know, if I did, I would want to go the other way and kind of do like a more produced show, like have it, you know, not just like set up mics in the practice room. Not there's anything wrong with that. Not there's anything wrong with it. I need to be explicitly clear. There's bands that like I love that have done that. I'm like, hell yeah, that's awesome. But it's hard for me to do anything lightly, I guess. So I would approach it in a serious manner, and it would be something that I would want to have. Again, 1,000-mile walk in the desert for an ice cream cone, I guess, you know,
I think I understand that completely, because I do know, having recorded in the past, you know, the radio show, and there's a very distinct difference to recording versus doing it live. And even though I'm not doing the show live for somebody watching, you know, that's like literally watching, I mean, but you know it's being, you know, or that
it hits differently. It feels different, like in ways that are maybe imperceptible. And for some people, they don't care, and that's fine. But there is an immediacy to doing things live that I guess I got to be careful with my language here, so I don't sound too full of myself. But it's a good live band, you know, that presents, especially for a band that operates ostensibly in some expanded universe of like the noisy rock world. Like, it's a show,
right?
And I'm not afraid to mention that, because I think that's something that is notable. Now, are you into the music or something? I don't know. Like, but it's a show, and part of the show is the interaction between person and band. And so for me, like, a live streamed set is something completely different. And because of that, I would want it to be, I would want it to fit the ethos of the band, and I have not figured out any way that they could do that without doing the big produced, like, just ridiculous for the profile of the band
right
setup.
No, I understand completely. I think that, you know, and how you want to present the music is, you know, your decision as an artist. So
right, and you know, they're not even sitting here and crying around it. You know, it's like it's fine. Like people, people are like, hey, when are you live streaming a set? You know, no one's asking. It's people get it, and like it's. I'm not making a big deal about it, but that's definitely my thing. It has given more. It has made me think more about the idea of making more produced music videos. We haven't really made that many, and which is weird because I like the art form, but for whatever reason, I was kind of downplayed it. Like there was a good one for Jilted Dragon off the Protons and Electrons series that Rick from the Poster Children did that I thought was pretty clever and cool. And Ron did 3 kind of found footage one. Ron Pertee is a Racine dude, has a talk show, and they're great and they're awesome. But for me, it's just like, I don't know, okay, let's make a video, sure, fine. But it would have to be again, it would have to be as good as the music,
right?
And maybe that's because I'm coming out of some position of a fan too. And whatever, it's not like you can't make something good low budget. I mean, you know, just the power of like what you have in your phone is like so much more than like, you know, 70s film directors ever had. And I love seeing like people be creative with it and do cool stuff with it. But I'm also not tripping over myself to force myself into doing that. Like if it's something that like there's some ideas, there's some stuff floated around, which I'm always like, yeah, we'll see. If that happens, cool, but we'll see. I also think that, you know, again, not to do the thing where I try to make the mountain come to me, but I think it's an interesting record, and I think that if it rewards multiple listens, and if that's the kind of thing that is of interest to you, then, you know, just listen to the record. Does everything need to have like a freaking attending live video? Like, I don't know. I find that annoying sometimes, and we've gone over in previous appearances about how many songs I write about things that annoy me. So, yeah.
Well, yeah,
of which the list is numerous.
Well, and it kind of speaks to the noise of just the internet, you know, like there's just so much out there, and perhaps the record just needs to, you know, is best standing on its own as it's one in the vessel that it is the way it is. So
there's a big difference. I'm stealing this from someone. I think it is that was on the show recently, but there's a difference in wanting to speak and having something to say.
Right.
And for me, it's very important to only engage when I have something to say. And thus far, that's been pretty easy for me because I've got a lot to say, apparently. You know, is anyone going to listen to it? I don't know. I mean, that's not the point. The point is that there's something to say. And this is the most something to say of anything that I've ever done. Anything that I've ever done. Which is why I put so much pressure on myself to get it right. Because it's like, well, you know, you're not going to have Dark Passengers Part 2, probably. So if you're going to do it, you better freaking do it.
Right. Well, and I think you did. I think it's an excellent record. I think it hits the mark. And I think, you know, based on everything you described, you know, it comes across the way that you intended it to come across.
That's,
you know,
awesome. That's really, well, you're a very attentive listener, Craig, and we all appreciate the amount of level and effort you put into supporting awesome music and being a part of the ecosystem. So, I mean, when I hear from folks such as yourself, something along those lines, that's that makes it all worthwhile.
Well, thank you. So Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends new record is titled Dark Passengers. Check it out now on neutronfriends.bandcamp.com as well as learningcurverecords.bandcamp.com, or pick up a copy at either one of those or learningcurverecords.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Time.
You too, man.